Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So we continue Śrī Tattva-sutra. Yesterday we talked about knowledge and detachment. Actually, we started talking about knowledge and detachment even on what's today, Friday, so Tuesday. Then yesterday we had a more in-depth discussion on what knowledge and detachment are, what their position is in relation to bhakti, right? So they're necessary in order to cultivate bhakti, but they're not parts of bhakti. So we have to utilize them in the right mood to serve bhakti, but then at one point we also give them up once we reach our purified state. So as long as we're in the conditioned state, knowledge and renunciation are very important for us, but they're not important independent of Krishna service. So that's where we were. So Sutra 37 said that divine knowledge brings liberation and mundane knowledge brings bondage. Sutra 38 says proper renunciation brings liberation, whereas dry renunciation brings additional bondage. And at the end of yesterday's class, we talked about the true definition of Yukta Vairagya. We talked about some common misconceptions of Yukta Vairagya and the dangers of seeing it, something that's not Yukta Vairagya as Yukta Vairagya. And today we're going to read some of Srila Prabhupada's commentaries on this matter, and then also we'll continue Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's commentary regarding this, the two types of renunciation. First, just to recap where we were, what we left with at the end of yesterday's class, because we kind of kept talking about it. So to recap though, the reason it's dangerous to misidentify or misdefine the term Yukta Vairagya is generally what's passing as Yukta Vairagya these days is Sakam Karma Yoga. It means I'm attached to something, but I want to make it so at least I engage in Krishna service, right? So whatever it is, I'm attached to it, I get it, and I use that in Krishna service. That means I'm attached to it, that's Sakam. I'm using it, the karma, but I'm engaging in Krishna service, yoga, Sakam Karma Yoga. Now the danger of thinking that while we're engaging in Sakam Karma Yoga, which isn't the worst thing in the world, that's a good thing, there's yoga involved. But if we consider that to be Yukta Vairagya, which is on a much higher platform, then we can be practicing Sakam Karma Yoga for many years, many decades, and wondering why we're not getting the result of bhakti, pure bhakti, because we're only practicing the beginning level of bhakti, right? So if we identify what our attachment is for what it really is, right? This is Sakam Karma Yoga. Gradually, I want to get to Nishkam Karma Yoga, where I'm doing the same thing. I'm still interacting with these things, but now there's no more attachment. Then, once we get to that state where we become detached from our own material enjoyment, then we can qualify for Yukta Vairagya, right? Because we're going to be serving Krishna anyway. So if something comes up and it's favorable toward us, and that is proper Yukta Vairagya. But if we consider this Sakam Karma Yoga Yukta Vairagya, we will be in this process for a very long time, and we're going to be wondering why it's not working. Right? And I talked to many devotees that are in that boat. They've been practicing for decades, but somehow they're not making as much advancement as they thought they would be making. And a lot of times it's because we misdefine these terms. Sadhu Sangha, Yukta Vairagya. What were some of the other ones we were discussing yesterday? What it means to actually study Srimad Bhagavatam in the proper mood. So not just hearing, but actually listening in the mood of humility and servitude, and actually applying those principles when we learn them, not just that we memorize them so that we can tell others, how they should be living their life, but understanding them so that we understand how to live our lives, how to apply it. Same thing with living in the Dham. It doesn't mean just you go to the place and you live there, you build a house and maybe make some business so you can maintain your house. That's not necessarily what that means. It means you can do that to maintain. But living in the Dham, the reason for living in the Dham is because Krishna's pastimes happen here. So you want to link to that as much as possible. So you go to the places of pilgrimage that remind you of Krishna's pastimes. You take association from the advanced devotees who are also here for that reason, because this is where Krishna's pastimes took place. You bathe in the Ganga because these are the waters that became purified by washing Krishna's feet, and therefore we're trying to get the residue from Krishna's feet. We're taking advantage of that nectar, right? So it's about the right mood. So you can do all of these things and not have the right mood. And when you don't have the right mood, as Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur pointed out, if you don't have that devotional sentiment, the process isn't going to work the way you think it is, right? Whether you're cultivating knowledge or you're practicing renunciation, if you don't have the proper drive, the proper consciousness, it's not going to have the result that we actually want. So that's a recap of where we left off yesterday. Now, since Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur was talking about the two kinds of renunciation, the appropriate renunciation and the fake, false renunciation, Yukta Vairagya and Palgu Vairagya, he mentioned that proper renunciation or Yukta Vairagya is performed when, without being attached to the results of one's work and acting purely and in a saintly manner, one offers the results of his work to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This kind of renunciation brings liberation from the bondage of repeated birth and death. And this concept, it's called the Īśopaniṣad concept, right, which is discussed in the beginning of Śrī Īśopaniṣad. So here are mantras 1 and 2 of Śrī Īśopaniṣad. Everything animate or inanimate that is within the universe is controlled and owned by the Lord. One should therefore accept only those things necessary for himself, which are set aside as his quota, and one should not accept other things, knowing well to whom they belong. One may aspire to live for hundreds of years if he continuously goes on working in that way, for that sort of work will not bind him to the laws of karma. There is no alternative to this way for man, right? So in those two verses, mantras 1 and 2, it covers huge sections of what's covered in Bhagavad Gita when it's talking about what is action, what is inaction, and what is forbidden action. Karma, akarma, and vikarma. So Krishna explains it in a much more comprehensive way to explain to Arjuna, who then also had questions, because if you're actually acting, it doesn't look like inaction, right? It seems like something else, but really, if you are acting with the proper consciousness, then there's no reaction, therefore it's not karma. So it's not falling into the definition of what karma is, because karma has to have a reaction, right? So just with these two verses, understanding the sambandha, that everything that's animate or inanimate, so everything within this universe, is controlled and known by the Supreme Lord. So you have the Sat and Ishvara in that first sentence of the first verse. Then one should therefore accept only those things necessary for himself, which are set aside as his quota, and should not accept other things, knowing well to whom they belong. That's also part of the sambandha. You know the relationship, right? And you also know that you do have some quota, and that's what you accept, and you're not attached to it, right? This will come up later too. When we truly become situated on the transcendental platform, Nasochati nakangshati, there's no hankering for that which we do not have. So anything outside of the quota, we're not desiring, we don't hanker for, we're not trying to accumulate. And the things that we do have that are part of our quota, if somehow they're taken away, then there's no lamentation, because we know that everything comes from Krishna and everything's taken away from Krishna. So whatever I have, that's what I'm meant to have, right? That's how one is situated on the liberated platform. And so one may aspire to live for hundreds of years if he continuously goes on working in that way. So he can go on, and you will not incur sin. Why? Because that sort of work does not bind him to the laws of karma. And just in case we think, okay, well, that's one way to deal with transcendence. So mantra 2 ends with, there is no alternative to this way for man, right? Because we have a very specific problem. We misused our free will, and here we are identifying with matter. The only way to solve that problem is to stop identifying with matter, go back to the origin of our mistake, and redirect our consciousness from I am independent from Krishna to I am servant of Krishna. Right? There's no alternative to this way for man. Continuing. Yes?
How we estimate our quota?
How do we estimate our quota? We don't. It's set aside for us. So we have to put forth a certain amount of endeavor that needs to be done, but we shouldn't over-endeavor the things that are, So generally, if you look at the rules of varnashrama, within your occupation, you're set aside however many hours per day that you're meant to work, and you don't work more than that, right? Whatever you get within that time, that's your quota, right? So if you're saving up for a bigger house, so therefore you want to work overtime, you're going beyond your quota there, right? So the quota is different for everybody. Someone has better karma, their quota is very big. Someone has not so good karma, their quota is very small. But when we surrender unto Krishna, our karma changes. If we are truly surrendered to Krishna, we're no longer subject to the laws of reaction. So the karma is taken away, and then we just have everything we need, right? So depending on what our occupation is, that's basically what I said for a householder, Shudra, or even Vaishya. But the Brahmanas and Kshatriyas, they're not in it for the money. They're doing it because it's their duty. So they just accept whatever comes. So the Kshatriyas try to make it so the field that they're allotting to their subjects will be profitable enough to maintain the entire, community or kingdom, depending on how big of a Kshatriya they are. But yeah, we know what our quota is by what Krishna gives us. We do our duty, and then whatever we get in return, that's what our quota is. Different for everyone. Yes?
So being not greedy would mean that whatever comes after performing your duty, you are just satisfied.
Yeah. We get tested in Kali Yuga with this. Krishna sees if we're truly detached. So some days we'll get what we think is less than our quota. And we'll think, well, this is highly unfair. Maybe our quota comes later than we thought it was going to come. We try to control it. And so when we see that we're trying to control it, then that means that we weren't accepting our quota. We think we're still in control of it. And so sometimes we're tested like that. But if we truly are detached, even when our quota is less than what we expect, no problem. We've fasted before, right? No problem. So if we get a little less lunch than we thought we needed, and then we go out and, endeavor to get more, that's not really showing Krishna that we have faith that, he's providing everything for us. Right? It's a subtle thing. it may take a while for us to really catch on to that. But like the extreme example is the sadhus that do the Python Vrata. You know those guys? They lay in one spot, and if food comes along, they eat. If food doesn't come along, they don't eat. Right? So pythons, I mean, they eat a lot when they eat. You know, an animal comes and they eat the whole thing. So they can go some days without eating again, no problem. And so can we. We can go several days without eating. Some of us, I'm sure, have followed some version of the Bhishma Panchaka fast. So it's 5 days of fasting, whether it's just water or the 5 different things from the cows on 5 different days, or fruits and roots. No matter what, it's an austerity. If you're only eating fruits and roots for 5 days, that's an austerity. You follow that for 1 day, and it's also an austerity, because the next day you're feeling lightheaded and you can't wait to break fast. So we're familiar with austerity, right? That's no problem. So the idea is that we just have to have faith that Krishna is going to provide whatever we need, and that's what the quota is. And then if we prove that when we're dissatisfied, we try to take matters into our own hands, then Krishna knows that we're not quite at that point where we understand who's in control, right? And so it'll take a bit more time to get that devotional clarity. Which is why we do these scheduled fasts to get used to it. There has to be some austerity, but you don't do it whimsically. You do it on specific days. So Caru, festival days where, when we do these fast days, especially for disappearance days of these great sadhus and acharyas, what that does is it gives us so many opportunities during the day to remember that particular sadhu or acharya, saintly person, because our stomach will grumble. And when our stomach grumbles, we tend to go to, grab a snack or, walk to the kitchen or whatever. But when we know we're fasting on that day, that's a reminder. So, reminder, okay, so why am I doing this today? Oh, because of this particular devotee. What did that devotee do? And we read about how wonderful this devotee was, and we realize, man, I have to learn from this devotee because I'm nowhere near on this level, right? And so a little bit of inconvenience in the form of a grumbly stomach is giving us the impetus to learn more about that devotee and learn from them. So it shouldn't just be that during or at the end of Bhagavatam class, we say a few little pastimes about that personality. Throughout the day, we should be trying to appreciate what their contribution was, because all of these great saintly persons left huge contributions, and so we get that opportunity to remember that when we fast. And then if it so happens on some other day our quota doesn't show up or whatever, then that gives us an opportunity to, again, just delve deeper into the philosophy, because chances are we have room to grow. So we take those opportunities as room to grow. And obviously we should be responsible about it. It's not that we, lock ourselves in a room and say, all right, Krishna, well, if you're going to feed me, you better make sure somehow it can get to. He can do that, but if you're doing that in that spirit, that's more of a challenge. You're trying to control Krishna. He's not the center of that. You're the center of that. So we have to be careful with it. We can't do this, which would be Falgo Vairagya, trying to renounce these things, but still being attached to them to see like that. But if we are sincere and we're locked in a room, not that we've put ourselves in there on our own accord and test Krishna to see if he's actually going to give us what we need. But if we are somehow locked in a room and we actually depend on Krishna, then everything will manifest, or the hunger will be taken away. It won't be an issue. Is the point. And so that takes a while to let go of our material attachment and just grab onto the mercy of Krishna. It's a long process, but that's what sadhana bhakti is all about, because we get to practice that. So we get to practice our austerities on fasting days and actually understand what that spirit should be. And then when we do understand that, then the fasting doesn't bother us so much. All right. Yeah.
We see our quota is much, how we can, no, our quota so much, how we can utilize it in Krishna consciousness. For example, if we have 2 apples and we can utilize it. Comes from Krishna consciousness. For example, someone have 2 cars or big house. He can engage it nicely, but someone cannot engage it. And just this house engage him in sense of sense gratification.
Yeah.
Therefore, this is not his quota because he cannot utilize it properly. Maybe if he needs some more small house or something.
The quota is also affected by karma, though, so you could have. So for aspiring devotees, what you said at the beginning there is exactly. It's our quota is what we can use in Krishna service, right? So if we can use a lot in Krishna service, even if previously our karma, wouldn't allow those facilities. If we can actually utilize those in Krishna service, then we'll have all those facilities. And as long as we're utilizing them in Krishna service, we'll have access to those, no problem. But as soon as we think that we're the doer, it'll get taken away from us. But just materially speaking, quota goes by also karma. So someone with really good karma, they're going to have 3 houses, But for us, aspiring devotees, if we had that previous karma where we have more food than we need, more cars than we need, more houses than we need, then we can allow responsible devotees to use those in Krishna service. Now, note I said responsible devotees, right? Because sometimes some aspiring devotees don't know how to properly use things, right? You give them a nice car, and after a month, it's no longer a nice car, right? So that's not ideal. So if you, we've all lived in a brahmacharya. You've lived in a brahmacharya ashram at some point, yeah. There's always something broken in the brahmacharya ashram, usually in the bathroom, usually the valves, they're either leaking or they don't work at all, or one side works, the other one doesn't, or, the toilet continues to run, the shower knob's broken up. There's always problems, the electric. It's because when we have this idea, when we move into the temple, we have this idea that nothing is mine, which is good, because it's not yours. But whose is it? It's Krishna's. So you should treat it better than if it were yours. But we have this tendency, well, it's not mine, so I don't have to take care of it, right? I don't have to tell anybody about it. I don't have to, But if you're the one who turned the faucet on and the knob came off, then that means, okay, it's my duty to find out who I have to talk to and, say, hey, I turned the knob and this came off. So is there something that we should be doing about this? Right. And if we maintain things properly, then, it doesn't come to a big problem. Usually we wait until it comes to a big problem. We have to redo the entire bathroom. We have to gut it. We have to do all the drains, all the supply lines, everything. That's how it is in New York Temple right now. And the contractor wanted how many $1 million? just $1 million, only $1 million to redo the brahmachari ashram bathroom. I mean, it's a big bathroom. It has a lot of showers and a lot of toilets, but $1 million, Hare Krishna, right? And in the meantime, as things were breaking, if they were repaired, it would have been no problem. But after things leak for a while, then the wood gets rotten, it gets soft, you got to replace that. So, it becomes an issue. So, if you are well-to-do, you come from a well-to-do background, and you want to, especially if you're still on the neophyte level, if you're on the transcendental platform, you can let anybody borrow that car you want, because you're going to be detached when it comes back broken down, right? But if you're still on the neophyte platform and you're going to get really upset when the car comes back and it's broken, and you're going to get really, angry about it, and it's going to affect your faith, then you should make sure that you So we have to use our intelligence. So in your case, I can eat 2 apples, but I have 3. That means you have the opportunity to distribute prasadam to another devotee, right? Or if you're alone and you have that, you can either, leave it to the side so somebody else can get it, or, sometimes you can make something else that you can have later. But generally, whatever's there, you use. That's the example that Srila Prabhupada gave. Whatever donations you get, you use right away. You put it into books or put it in construction. And he was very, what's the word, fastidious? He would take special note of what came in, and he would also make sure that he got the value. It wasn't that something came in, I have to spend it. He wants to make sure when he's spending it, he gets proper value. Not a farthing should be wasted. So we should get the best possible thing we can get with whatever we have. He would do like that. So he was expert at dealing with quota. We're not there yet, so we follow the examples. And it takes a while to become comfortable with being detached. It's a hard thing because for so long we've been holding on really tightly, trying to control. And as soon as we see things going in a slightly different way than what we expect, we try to fix it, try to grab the steering wheel and forcefully bring things back on track to what we think. But we need to become detached in the proper spirit of bhakti. And these are exercises that we do in order to get to that point, these mandatory fasting days and things like that. Anything else on that? Okay. Śrī Īśopaniṣad outlines the Īśavāsya principle for a broad range of transcendentalists. In Bhagavad Gita, this principle is developed and explained from social and metaphysical point of view. Bhagavad Gita states that the highest application of Īśavāsya is pure devotional service to the Lord. The nectar of devotion reveals how the Īśavāsya principle is understood and applied specifically by the devotees of the Lord, and the nectar of instruction summarizes the process of refinement and presents the ultimate understanding of the same Īśavāsya principle. Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport to Mantra 2, Śrī Īśopaniṣad, when altruistic activities are executed in the spirit of Śrī Īśopaniṣad, they become a form of karma yoga. Such activities are recommended in the Bhagavad Gita, 18th chapter, verses 5 through 9, for they guarantee their executor protection from the danger of sliding down into the evolutionary process of birth and death. Even though such God-centered activities may be half-finished, they are still good for the executor because they will guarantee him a human form in his next birth. In this way, one can have another chance to improve his position on the path of liberation. How one can execute God-centered activities is elaborately explained in the Bhakti-yoga Sindhu by Srila Rupa Goswami. We have rendered this book into English as the Nectar of Devotion. We recommend this valuable book to all who are interested in performing their activities in the spirit of Śrī Īśopaniṣad. So Śrī Īśopaniṣad convinces us or encourages us to fully understand that everything we do should be done for Krishna. Everything that exists is controlled and owned by Krishna. And if we understand what our relationship is to Krishna, we can take our quota that's set aside and use that properly in Krishna service. And if we go against that principle, if we try to take things that aren't set aside for us or use them in a way that's not engaged in Krishna service, then that's an entirely different part. That's the cultivation of material. So proper renunciation brings liberation. Dry renunciation brings additional bondage. So when we are convinced that yes, this is the way we should live our lives, not the cultivation of material, but the cultivation of spiritual, then we go and read books like Bhakti-yoga, which shows how to do that, right? How one executes these God-centered activities. Because there's specific ways, especially when we're still conditioned, and we have to do this sadhana bhakti. So Bhakti-yoga specifically tells us how. In Bhagavad Gita, 6th chapter, verse 1, the Supreme Personality of Godhead explains, one who is unattached to the fruits of his work and who works as he is obligated is in the renounced order of life, and he is the true mystic. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur continues, false renunciation, on the other hand, is dry, makes the heart hard, makes one proud, is petty, is likened to the renunciation practiced by monkeys living in the forest, and brings the suffering of repeated birth and death in the material world as its true result. In the Shruti Shastra, it is said, not by mere renunciation does one attain liberation. Right? So renunciation is needed in the cultivation of bhakti, but it's separate. So if one is just becoming renounced dryly, then it does not actually lead to liberation. In the Bhagavad Gita 18th chapter, text 8, the Supreme Personality of Godhead explains, anyone who gives up prescribed duties as troublesome or out of fear is said to be in the mode of passion. Such action never leads to the elevation of renunciation, right? So if we give up an activity because it's causing us trouble, or we're afraid that if we do this, something bad's going to happen, that's renunciation in the mode of passion, right? Bhagavad Gita 3.6, the Supreme Personality of Godhead again explains, one who restrains the senses and organs of action, but whose mind dwells on the sense objects, certainly deludes himself and is called a pretender, right? So this is a definition of paugo vairagya. So they restrain the senses and the organs of action, so they give up these things physically, but their mind is dwelling on those, right? So therefore they're still attached. It's not real renunciation. So certainly he's deluding himself and he is called a pretender. In Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 1-2-256, Srila Rupa Goswami explains, when one is not attached to anything, but at the same time accepts everything in relation to Krishna, one is rightly situated above possessiveness. On the other hand, one who rejects everything without knowledge of its relationship to Krishna is not as complete in his renunciation. So we have Yukta Vairagya and Paugo Vairagya. When one is not attached to anything, but at the same time accepts anything in relation to Krishna, one is rightly situated above possessiveness, right? So you have to not be attached to anything, and whatever you're accepting, it has to be only used completely in relation to Krishna. That's Yukta Vairagya. Then, on the other hand, one who rejects everything without knowledge of its relationship to Krishna is not as complete in its renunciation. So we just say, no, this is all nonsense, so we give it up, when it actually could be helping us in our service, then that's false renunciation. That's the other side of false renunciation. So you have this idea of giving something up and still being attached to it. That's one aspect of false renunciation. And the other one is you're so proud of the concept of renunciation that you won't even take things that would be favorable to execute your devotional service. Right? So you think the renunciation is more important than the devotional service. So there's those two aspects of Palgu Vairagya.
I'm just wondering about the previous ones, Bhagavad Gita 3.6. One who restrains the senses and awareness of action, but whose mind dwells on sense object, certainly deludes himself in the scope of the Candra. So, restrains the senses, but actually meditates on them.
Yes.
What about in the case that you meditate on the objects of sense gratification and you don't try to restrain because you know you cannot, but you're willing to use them in Krishna service. So in other words, you want to use them for Krishna, but at the same time you are attached to enjoy that.
Yeah, that's our process. That's Sakam Karma Yoga.
Sakam.
Yeah. You're attached to it and you do it, but you give the fruits to Krishna. I mean, some of the fruits. Right? Mm-hmm. So, for example, one moves into the temple and they think, oh, well, the highest ideal is to remain brahmachari. So therefore, I restrain my senses, but I'm continuously meditating on them. What happens to those people? They disappear, or if they're lucky, they get over that sense of, false prestige of the color of the cloth and just get married to a nice devotee. Right? But usually it doesn't end in a healthy way. Usually it's like they try to restrain themselves for so long until they can't do it anymore. And then instead of entering a relationship in a healthy way, a responsible way, they get attached to the first person they see. They get married even though they're not compatible. And then their life it doesn't run very smoothly, right? But if we understand, okay, I have this attachment and I've gone through the training, which, you should do to see if you can at least, maybe get rid of that attachment. Nope, it's still there, okay? So now responsibly, you have to deal with that. So sure, that attachment's there and you're going to have to go through that purification, which means you're going to have to get married, but you should do it in an intelligent way. Make sure the natures match, right? Make sure it's a proper fit. Make sure you both have the same idea, the same goals. Because what happens a lot of times is one of either the lady or the gentleman, one of them is super serious about devotional service, but just has a little bit of material attachment. And the other one, either the lady or the gentleman, is interested in spiritual life, but they have a lot of attachment. You put those two together, and neither of them are going to be satisfied. Because one is going to compromise further than he's comfortable in compromising, and the other one's still not going to be satisfied because they don't think it's compromising enough. Right? So all of these things are important to address, right? If we address them incorrectly, we end up with a mess. If we address them in a healthy way and correctly, then we have a shot at it, right? It could work, right? So if you know you're attached to sense gratification, even after going through some training, right? Give it the old college try. And it's still there. I have to purify my senses by engaging my senses. That's how it's done. So do it in the best possible way. Don't just, choose whoever happened to be smiling at you at the time. It's the one. Chances are, unless you're really lucky, chances are it's not going to work out as smoothly as you thought. Even when all the proper all the proper methods to make sure that the natures are similar. Sometimes even after that, it's difficult. Material life is difficult, right? Dealing with the own mind is difficult. Now dealing with someone else's mind also becomes more difficult. Then you have kids and there's other minds and it's like, what is going on? How did I get myself into this mess and how can I get out? Right? How did we get there? Oh, yeah, because there's these two aspects. So if you restrain your senses falsely, but your mind dwells on those, that's actually worse than being attached to something and then engaging it properly in Krishna service, right? Because if you are engaging it properly in Krishna service, then that is what purifies you. But just trying to be renounced and not connecting it to bhakti, that will not purify you, right? And then, of course, the statement is made, Srila Prabhupada makes it, and then Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur will also make it, is however far you get in that process, at least you stay, right? You don't lose anything, but better to just, keep going, give it your all, get as far as possible without being distracted by these lower aspects, these different details of bhakti. So we don't want to be, that's why in the beginning of the class, I don't think you were here yet, we don't want to consider Sakam Karma Yoga as Yukta Vairagya, because then we'll think that we're on a much higher platform and we won't be trying to get to the Nishkam Karma Yoga. We'll be working with attachment, thinking that we're in basically pure bhakti. We're just we're being practical. We're utilizing all these things in Krishna service. But if you're attached, that's not Vairagya, right? So Sakam Karma Yoga is fine. It's a good starting point. Right? But if you at least know that's where you are, then you see, okay, from here I want to get to Nishkam Karma Yoga. And from that platform, I actually can engage in Yukta Vairagya because then I'm not attached anymore. It is Vairagya. Right? But if we're down here and we think we're here, we could do this for years or decades and we're not making the progress that as advertised in Shastra. So is something wrong with the Shastra? No, something's wrong with your definition because you thought you were up here when you were down here, and therefore the process isn't working. You put you mix all these proper ingredients. You actually weighed them on a scale and you mix them properly, and you put them in the oven at like 100 degrees Fahrenheit when it should have been 360 degrees Fahrenheit. You're never going to get a cake out of that. You're going to get a hot, mushy mess, right? No matter how good you did the rest of it. You consider 100 degrees Fahrenheit to be the same as 360 degrees Fahrenheit. Forgive me for speaking in Fahrenheit. I know you guys speak in Celsius, but I don't know Celsius.
It's like,
what do you bake a cake at?
Well, generally on 200.
200 is a cake.
Yes.
Okay.
But 100 Fahrenheit will be something maybe like 40 Celsius.
Does it get that temperature outside?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So 40. You don't want to cook it at 40 when it should be at 200, right? Okay. It wasn't so bad. We can adjust sometime. Don't get me started with the metric system. No, Americans are foolish in the way they measure things, honestly.
Not foolish.
But somehow we're
different
and foolish. It doesn't make sense. We're going to get to that too, actually. This is coming up, this whole concept, so I won't spoil it. I'm tempted to. Okay, so we know the different aspects of renunciation. All right, so then continuing. In Bhagavad Gita, 18th chapter, verses 7 and 8, the Supreme Personality of Godhead explains, prescribed duties should never be renounced. If by illusion one gives up his prescribed duties, such renunciation is said to be in the mode of ignorance. So, what was the mode of passion? Renunciation? We just read it.
You think it's difficult, and that's what you want to do.
Either it's too hard, or you're afraid that you're going to get some sort of bad result. Okay, and then so mode of ignorance is when you actually give up your prescribed duty, right? So mode of ignorance, generally, you don't know what is to be done and what is not to be done, right? That's how it's characterized. Mode of passion means you basically do the opposite of what you should be doing. But mode of ignorance, you don't know what you should do, what you shouldn't do, and you always choose the wrong thing. So you actually have a prescribed duty, and you said, I'm not going to do it. So that's renunciation in the mode of ignorance. So not real renunciation, yeah.
Isn't it opposite?
What's that?
Isn't it opposite that the question we don't know what to do and ignorance will do the opposite?
Yeah, it is, isn't it? But one
Mode of ignorance.
because there's different things that are done in the different modes, and I thought one of them was in ignorance. You don't know what is to be done and what is not to be done, but maybe that is passion.
No, I think that's ignorance. You don't want what to do, and either you do the wrong one or you don't do anything. And passion is do it with the wrong motivation.
Yeah,
You do it if you want some material profit or gain or
right.
respect or.
And goodness is, yeah, okay. Yeah,
But here in this case, it was explained that passion means you don't want to do it because it's too difficult.
yeah, because we're talking about, yeah, because you're afraid, so you think you're not going to get the result that you want, or it's too much of an endeavor to get what you want, therefore you give it up, right? And ignorance is actually just giving up your prescribed duty. And then there it is again. Anyone who gives up prescribed duties as troublesome or out of fear is said to be in the mode of passion. Such action never leads one to the elevation of renunciation. Then, chapter 18, text 9 and 11, the Supreme Personality of Godhead explains, but he who performs his prescribed duty only because it ought to be done and renounces all attachment to the fruit, his renunciation is in the mode of goodness, O Arjuna. It is indeed impossible for an embodied being to give up all activities. Therefore, it is said that he who renounces the fruits of action is the one who has truly renounced. Right? So real renunciation is just giving up the idea that I am in control of this thing, but you still perform your duty. Right? You're not attached to the fruits. In Bhagavad Gita 4:20-21, the Supreme Personality of Godhead again explains, abandoning all attachment to the results of his activities, ever satisfied and independent, he performs no fruitive action, although engaged in all kinds of undertakings. So it's akarma. Such a man of understanding acts with mind and intelligence perfectly controlled, gives up all sense of proprietorship over his possessions, and acts only for the bare necessities of life. Thus working, he is not affected by sinful reactions, right? Same as with mantras 1 and 2. This is basically mantras 1 and 2 there. Of Śrī Īśopaniṣad. Then in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 6, verses 17 and 18, Supreme Personality of Godhead again explains, he who is temperate in his habits of eating, sleeping, working, and recreation can mitigate all material pains by practicing the yoga system. When the yogi, by practice of yoga, disciplines his mental activities and becomes situated in transcendence, devoid of all material desires, he is said to have attained yoga. Did you find?
Mm-hmm.
What was it?
It's about understanding this.
Understanding in the 3 modes.
That understanding which cannot distinguish between religion and irreligion, between action that should be done and action that should not be done, is in the mode of passion.
Yeah.
So it cannot distinguish.
Right.
And understanding which considers irreligion to be religion and religion to be irreligion,
Yeah. So it's, yeah.
under the spell of illusion and darkness, and strives always in the wrong direction, is in the mode of ignorance.
Right.
So passion means everything. It's all the same. And ignorance means you take the good for bread and that.
Yeah. You just have the exact opposite understanding of what's to be done. Right. So it kind of goes with this one too, with renunciation. That's understanding. So renunciation means they just don't do the prescribed duty, which you're meant to do. So they don't do it. Passion is, they don't understand whether it's the right thing or the wrong thing. So if it's inconvenient, they're not going to do it. If it's convenient, they'll do it. And goodness is, I'm going to do it because I have to do it, but I'm not entitled to the fruits, right? So yeah, it follows. Yeah, thank you for that. Thanks for that. In Srimad Bhagavatam 1, first canto, second chapter, verses 8 through 10, Srila Sutta Goswami explains, the occupational activities a man performs according to his own position are only so much useless labor if they do not provoke attraction for the message of the personality of Godhead. All occupational engagements are certainly meant for ultimate liberation. They should never be performed for material gain. Furthermore, according to the sages, one who is engaged in the ultimate occupational service should never use material gain to cultivate sense gratification. Very important. One who's engaged in the ultimate occupation, so bhakti, should never use material gain to cultivate sense gratification. I have a little story for you. Sometimes we do this. There was a family who was part of a farming project. And there were some devotees who, since this family was part of this farming project, they wanted to contribute. Because basically they left society behind and moved into this farm, something that a lot of devotees want to do, but they're not courageous enough to do it. And so these devotees who were inspired by them, they would give these donations. So here, take some donations, and then you can live a little bit more comfortably on the farm. And so there were some donations, right? And so they decided, well, let's go to the movies and go out to eat. Right? But we can point out that when it's specifically a donation given by other devotees to support a devotional decision that you've made, that means those funds should be very wisely spent in Krishna service, right? So when we get these, when we're engaged in devotional service, even when we're just collecting devotions from non-devotees, that, whatever, they're just giving donation, right? It's not intended for, as far as they're concerned, it's going good. We should never use that for material gain to cultivate sense gratification. Very important thing to understand. Because otherwise it's going against the Isavasya principle, right? We're taking something that belongs to Krishna, we're using it in the wrong way. It's especially worse if that something came from someone else and they're actually trying to give it in their eyes, they're giving it as a donation to Krishna. You use it for something else, that's very bad. If it's something that you got as your quota and you misuse it, that's unfortunate. But when you're misusing something that someone else has given specifically for Krishna service, that's much more than unfortunate. It's quite bad. Yeah.
It was given to this family particularly or to the project in general?
Family. But still.
Yeah. And then there is also this thing that if they are depending on Varna, they should not even accept them. Only if they are devotees, they can give to preaching or something.
Yeah, whatever the case may be. But yeah, the point is we just have to be very careful about these things.
I also know such examples because now I just visited few farm projects and I heard from the brahmachari who's taking care of these things that he told me directly that donations are coming and they're satisfied that they are not doing much more in these places. So it's quite awesome.
Yeah, generally when donations come, especially if it's to a project, instead of some of the people at the project, then it should go to the project, because it means someone sees a value in that particular thing, so they give a donation for it, so it gets it. Just like in the temple, there's different ways to donate, right? You can donate to the different departments, right? Or you can just put generally in the, what's it called, the hundi box, right? Hundi? Is that what I said? Or did I say something different? I thought I said that. So, yeah, there's different things. And then, so the treasurer, because congregational members will sometimes, they prefer to donate money to the deities, but not necessarily for devotee maintenance. That should come from something else. So if they see that the bulk of the donations are going toward Irish Spring soap and Colgate toothpaste and whatever, they're asking why do the deities use Irish Spring soap and Colgate toothpaste? Why aren't they using lemon juice and salt like that?
One of the principles of action in Pancharya Pujiti is that the pujari should not be dressed more opulently than the deity.
Yeah. Good policy. Good policy. So yeah, either way, for us, we have to be very careful how we use the quota that Krishna gives us. We want to make sure we're using it properly. And especially if someone on the outside is giving part of what was set aside as their quota to give to you to then engage in Krishna service, you absolutely want to make sure that every portion of that is actually going to Krishna service. You definitely don't want to mess with that. You don't want to mess with the first one either, but definitely don't want to mess with the second one. Continuing. Life's desires should never be directed towards sense gratification. One should desire only a healthy life or self-preservation, since a human being is meant for inquiry about the absolute truth. Nothing else should be the goal of one's work, right? All action is meant to realize Krishna. That's it. So if we're working in any other mood, right? What was it? One was knowledge that's directed to Krishna, one was knowledge that's directed anywhere but Krishna, right? Probably won't find it. Anyway, somewhere in there. So it's really that simple. And that's the Īśopaniṣad principle. So we have to understand that too. And again, it's a process. So we shouldn't beat up ourselves too badly if we're not there yet, but we should certainly feel badly enough about it that we continue to strive to actually go in the proper direction. So just the right amount of bad feeling where it's not all about us, but it's about doing the right thing properly. Here, someone may ask, what will happen if someone practices devotional cultivation but fails in the practice of renunciation? The following sutra satisfies this doubt, right? So, okay, I'm starting to engage in this process of sadhana bhakti, but I failed in the practice of renunciation, either because I thought it was yukta vairagya, but I was actually doing stuck on karma yoga, or I knew that I should be renounced, but it was just too difficult, right? Then what happens? What happens for someone like that? So Sutra 39 answers this question. Pratyahara samapatte parabhaktya siddhav api nadha patanam. In the observation of devotional cultivation, if the renunciation is not properly followed, the ultimate bhakti is not attained, although the aspirant is safeguarded from downfall. I'm going to read that again. In the observation of devotional cultivation, if the renunciation is not properly followed, the ultimate bhakti is not attained, although the aspirant is safeguarded from downfall. So the good news is, whatever bit of bhakti you followed, you pick that up in your next life. You didn't lose it. But the real thrust of this verse that I think that we should really focus on and really understand is that when we're cultivating devotional service, if this renunciation isn't properly followed, the ultimate bhakti is not attained, the phala bhakti. Right? So renunciation is important, right? Proper renunciation, not just dry renunciation. Yeah, we have to understand that, and we have to understand what it means, because if we define the term, again, we already went over that. So this is very important. to understand what exactly is proper renunciation and how to properly use that. Super important. So we find that out through the association of devotees, through Shastra. We gave a very thorough understanding of it. It can become difficult in practice because of that. I'll actually come up here. Yeah, I'll just do that because this is coming. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur is going to point out, why is it that we're so attached to these things? Is it like the inherent nature of the soul or something? Or, what's going on? This is going to be addressed. So, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur comments to this sutra. Unless the body, mind, and the senses are controlled by the help of theistic knowledge and proper renunciation, the observation of devotional cultivation cannot provide any upliftment. Man, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has some zingers, doesn't he? Some really heavy statements. I'm going to read that again because it's very important. And it's also a summary of the last few sutras. You'll notice that, right? Unless the body, mind, and senses, we were talking about that earlier, are controlled by the help of theistic knowledge, not just knowledge, but theistic knowledge. Theistic means centered around God. And proper renunciation, so not just renunciation, but proper, again, centered around God. The observation of devotional cultivation cannot provide any upliftment, right? Because what is bhakti if it's not centered around Krishna? It's not bhakti. Bhakti means love for Krishna, right? So if your knowledge and your renunciation aren't centered around Krishna, you will not get upliftment because it will not be bhakti. It'll just be dry knowledge, dry renunciation. And what do those two things lead to? There were two sutras that explained it that we covered last time. The sutras were worded exactly the same, except that one said knowledge and one said renunciation.
Liberation.
The proper one's for liberation, and the improper one is bondage, right? It can't provide any upliftment because it's binding you to zero. It's providing bondage, right? So if you don't have the theistic knowledge and proper renunciation, it will just be bondage. The only gain of such practice is that it will guard the aspirant from downfall, right? So there is that plus side. But really, the thrust of this verse we should understand is we have to have proper knowledge, proper renunciation in order for it to actually be bhakti. Otherwise, it's not. In Bhagavad Gita.
So this meant by downfall, like it's not losing the credit of bhakti, or it means like falling down to material.
The way I'm taking it is that the whole no diminution or loss. That obviously, if there's offenses, you can lose access to your bhakti. But as soon as those offenses are dealt with, then you pick right up where you left off. So that's how I'm taking it. Because there is some bhakti involved, but since it's not supported by proper knowledge and proper renunciation, since it's being taken in the other direction, it means it's not going to take us in that direction because there's that bit of bhakti, so it won't take us on the wrong way, the downfall. But it will continue to hold us here until we actually direct that knowledge and renunciation toward Krishna instead of toward material. Is that good? In Bhagavad Gita 6:40, the Supreme Personality of Godhead explains, O son of Pritha, a transcendentalist engaged in the auspicious activities does not meet with destruction either in this world or in the spiritual world. One who does good, my friend, is never overcome by evil. So good here means actually light instead of darkness. It doesn't mean like pious, like materially good. Srila Prabhupada writes in his purport to Śrī Īśopaniṣad Mantra 3, in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 6, verses 41 through 43, it is stated that a man who enters upon the path of self-realization but does not complete the process, despite having sincerely tried to realize his relationship with God, is given a chance to appear in a family of Shudji or Shrimat. The word Shuchi indicates a spiritually advanced Brahmana, and Srimat indicates a Vaishya, a member of the mercantile community. So the person who fails to achieve self-realization is given a better chance in his next life due to his sincere efforts in this life. If even a fallen candidate is given a chance to take birth in a respectable and noble family, one can hardly imagine the status of one who has achieved success. By simply attempting to realize God, one is guaranteed birth in a wealthy or aristocratic family. But those who do not even make an attempt, who want to be covered by illusion, who are too materialistic and too attached to material enjoyment, must enter into the darkest regions of hell, as confirmed throughout the Vedic literature. Such materialistic asuras sometimes make a show of religion, but their ultimate aim is material prosperity. The Bhagavad Gita, 16th chapter, verses 17 and 18, rebukes such men by calling them Atma Sambhav Ita, meaning that they are considered great only on the strength of deception and are empowered by the votes of the ignorant and by their own material wealth. Such asuras, devoid of self-realization and knowledge of Isavasya, the Lord's universal proprietorship, are certain to enter into the darkest regions. Then Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur continues. Attainment of relief from major sins like falsehood, intoxication, voluptuary. Anybody know what voluptuary means?
No.
Voluptuary is when a person is devoted to luxury or sensual happiness. So Hiranyakashipu was a prime example of a voluptuary of the highest caliber, right? So we're going on a list of sins here. Voluptuary, laziness, greed, disparaging. Disparaging is when you're being derogatory towards someone, you're making less of their contributions. Trespassing the superiors, so breaching etiquette. Idling, which is a lot like laziness. Deceiving, which is a lot like falsehood. Breach of duty towards parents, which is a lot like trespassing the superiors, but specifically to the parents. Treason, which is when you go against the good of the community purposefully. Evil company in the guise of dance and music. Hey man, we're just having a good time. No harm here, we're just having a good time. Ignorance, egotism, etc. So here's this list of sins, but Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur is saying, when you attain relief from these sins, this list of sins, that is called retraction. So we were talking about retraction before. So there's attraction when we think that we're the center and we're trying to enjoy these things. And there's retraction, which is withdrawing that attraction and then putting the attraction where it actually belongs. Then Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur continues. So this list of sins is a very important thing for us to keep track of. And we're going to find out soon. Although the tendency for sins is not inherent with the constitution of the jivas, since they have gained ground in the hearts of the jivas since time immemorial, they act like the natural character of the jivas. When these unnatural habits are subdued by regular practice, this will help the aspirant to discover the intrinsic nature of the jiva. So right now, since we're spontaneously attracted to sense gratification, it feels like that's our nature, right? It's just our inherent nature to enjoy materially. And Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur points out that the reason it feels like that is because since time immemorial, we've been trying to cultivate this. It's the only thing we've been dealing with as far as we can remember, time immemorial, right? And so it seems like a reality to us. So it actually seems like they're the natural character of the jivas. But when these unnatural habits are subdued by regular practice, this helps the aspirant to discover the intrinsic nature of the jiva. So the actual natural proclivities, tendencies of the jiva, right? Then Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur advises, everyone should keep a thorough list of all these sinful habits. I wonder why we should do that. When a particular evil habit is brought under control, the attention should be given to the rest. So it's not like, okay, I've conquered voluptuary, now I'm in good shape. No, now you put your attention on the other ones that are holding you back, right? Many people are unable to avoid their sinful tendencies, even by being aware of them, because of the lack of proper effort in controlling them, right? So even if we understand that these tendencies are there, many people can't avoid engaging in those sinful behaviors because lack of proper effort in controlling them, right? So it's us. It's not the devil made me do it, or Krishna made a mistake in creating this material world. The only thing that keeps us sinning is our lack of proper effort in controlling them. We actually put forth the proper effort. We put knowledge where it belongs. We put renunciation where it belongs, with Krishna as the center. They're gone. Done. Right? Of course, at the time of controlling the sins in the prescribed manner, one should also pay due regard for the devotional cultivation. Otherwise, everything will end up in dry asceticism. So when we're observing these different sins that have control over us, when we're trying to counteract those, we shouldn't lose sight of the bhakti, the devotional cultivation. Because that's the reason, right? That's the reason we want to rid ourselves of these, because they are what's keeping us from returning to Krishna. Then he continues, there are many people who don't follow the method of retraction, removing their attraction from these sins, but display symptoms of advanced devotees, right? Such symptoms are not the real signs of divine love, because worldly lust cannot remain within a person or with a person who has developed genuine divine sentiments and divine love. Srila Rupa Goswami explains in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 1.3.43, 1.3.46, and 1.3.54. Even ordinary devotees cannot have such pure attachment for Krishna. Therefore, how is it possible for success to be achieved by persons whose hearts are contaminated by the actions and reactions of fruitive activities, and who are entangled by various types of mental speculation? Sometimes it is found that a person actually attached to material enjoyment or salvation has the good fortune to associate with pure devotees while they are engaging in chanting the holy name of the Lord. By the good grace of the Lord, one may also cooperate and join in the chanting. At that time, simply by the association of such pure devotees, the moon-like rays from their hearts reflect on him, and by the influence of the pure devotees, he may show some likeness of attachment caused by inquisitiveness. If one commits offenses at the lotus feet of a devotee, one's shadow attachment or para attachment can be extinguished. This extinguishing is like the waning of the full moon, which gradually decreases and at last becomes dark. Before we go to the next page, I have two questions to ask that I want you to answer. If sin is not inherent in the nature of the soul, then why does sin come so naturally to us?
We are doing it for so long that it became our second nature.
Yeah, we can't remember any other way, so it's just what we do. Right?
By habit, we do.
Right. The other question, what is the cause of not being able to overcome sinful tendencies, even if we're aware of them? What's the cause? If I can't overcome my sinful tendencies, why? What's the reason?
Lack of proper endeavor.
Lack of proper effort in controlling them. That's what Śrīla Bhaktivinoda Thakur says. So we can't blame our temple president who wasn't nice enough to us when we moved into the temple. We can't blame our parents who didn't raise us properly. We can't blame our teachers. We can't blame our guru. We can't blame Krishna. We can't blame the devil. Right? all we have to do to overcome these sins is put the proper effort, right? If we put the proper effort, Krishna sees that sincerity, and no problem, the attachment's gone. The attachment goes from how does this serve me to how do I use this in Krishna's service. That's our whole process. Then, the conclusion to Sutra 39 that Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur gives. The conclusion is that everyone should practice retraction. What's retraction?
Avoiding the sins.
Right, withdrawing from these sins, right? In the proper way. It means you have to keep the sight of bhakti. Unless retraction is accepted as a constant companion of devotional practices, the divine love will not be manifested. Unless retraction is accepted as a constant companion of devotional practices, the divine love will not be manifested. Hence the following sutra. This is the last sutra of the Abhideya section. Pratyahara samridhya sadhanam bhavas tataiva bhavat prema. With the proper development of renunciation, one attains active devotional service, sadhana, then ecstasy, bhava, and finally pure love, prema, for the Lord. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur comments, by regular practice, one makes advancement in renunciation and devotional service. First, there is active devotional service, sadhana, then ecstasy, bhava, and finally pure love, prema, for the Lord. Thus, with proper development of renunciation, one makes advancement in devotional service, culminating in ecstasy and pure devotional love. So how do we attain bhava and prema?
By engaging in sadhana.
By properly engaging in sadhana, proper development of renunciation in sadhana, yes. This next paragraph is super important. To what extent this retraction is followed, so to whatever extent we're actively trying to withdraw our senses from these sinful sense objects, to whatever extent this retraction is followed, the aspirant attains purity to the same proportion. Depending on the stage of purification, to the same degree, the spiritual form of the Lord is revealed to the devotee. Right? So as they surrender unto me, I reward them accordingly. So if we are not properly engaging in retraction, we are dealing with a minor portion of Krishna's form. Maybe it's just Brahman realization, maybe it's Paramatma, maybe it's Bhagavan, but it's not actually understanding him very well as a person, right? And the purity comes with to whatever extent we're following this retraction. The Supreme Personality of Godhead explains Bhagavad Gita chapter 9 verse 9. Follow the regular principles of bhakti-yoga. In this way you will develop a desire to attain me. Right? So we follow these regular principles. And in doing so, we actually develop this desire to attain Krishna. When that desire is there, then we naturally give up these materialistic tendencies, and then we can grow properly. In the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 1, 2, verses 1 and 2.
Just want to share that this is 12.9, not 9.
Okay, thank you. That's 12.9, not 9.9. In Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, it might be 1, 2, verses 1 and 2. Srila Rupa Goswami explains, the three categories of devotional service are 1. Devotional service in practice, sadhana. 2. Devotional service in ecstasy, bhava. And 3. Devotional service in pure love of Godhead, prema. Right? That's what this sutra was talking about, these three. When we wish to develop our innate capacity for devotional service, there are certain processes which, by our accepting and executing them, will cause that dormant capacity to be invoked. Such practice is called sadhana bhakti. And so that's the end of chapter 4, Śrī tattva-sutra. We will quickly read this summary of chapter 4, and then we'll see if there are any questions on the Abhideya portion, or even on the Sambandha portion, now that we have more information on the Abhideya. So, summary of chapter 4. Chapter 4 of Śrī Tattva-sutra pertains to the fourth topics of the Upanishads, the means of attaining Brahman, sadhana. Bhakti is unalloyed, full attachment to Krishna, the transcendental Lord. According to the situation of the living entities, in other words, conditioned or liberated, devotional service is also understood to be in two stages. Phala, which is the end, the fruit, and upaya, the means, regulative, sadhana. Spontaneous love of God is independent, unalloyed, and constitutionally the nature of the living entity, and therefore does not have any other limbs. Right? So, renunciation isn't a limb of bhakti. Bhakti is complete in itself. But that being said, cultivation of favorable devotion and retraction from sense gratificatory activities are the two limbs of regulated devotion. So, spontaneous love has no other limbs. But sadhana bhakti, since we're attracted to the material world, in order to properly engage in sadhana bhakti, we have to do this retraction alongside of bhakti, but not independent from it. Cultivation of favorable devotion and retraction from sense gratificatory activities are the two limbs of regulated devotion. The 9 processes of devotional service begin with hearing and chanting, are the means by which one can develop such favorable devotional love for Krishna. The body is the chariot, the mind is the charioteer, the senses are the horses. Chariot back home toward Krishna consciousness from the path of sense gratification with the help of transcendental knowledge, not just knowledge, and proper engagement, not just engagement, of everything in devotional service is known as pratyahara, retraction. So proper knowledge, proper renunciation. Transcendental knowledge is the cause of liberation, and mundane materialistic knowledge is the cause of bondage, right? So depending on where we're directing our knowledge, it can either be helping us with our liberation from the material energy, or it can be binding us further to the material energy. Engagement of everything in Krishna's service, which is actual renunciation, is the cause of liberation, and pseudo-renunciation is the cause of bondage. If one is not fully free from sense gratification, the cultivation of devotional practices will not award transcendental love for Krishna. Very important. If one is not fully free from sense gratification, the cultivation of devotional practices will not award transcendental love for Krishna, although there will be no downfall, the bright side. To the extent of freedom from sense gratification, one can perform pure regulated devotional service, which turns into bhava bhakti, which will ultimately bloom into love for Krishna, prema. Very good summary. Okay, any questions?
Regarding the retraction, what are the mechanics how we can do this retraction?
So, like I said, you figure out which one's dragging you down the most. Where's the list? Falsehood, intoxication, voluptuary, laziness, greed, disparaging. It's like fault finding, trespassing the superior. So we figure out which one of these is our biggest enemy, right? And with our actual relationship between us, the other living entities, and Krishna, we see that, oh, these are actually wrong. And we understand why they're wrong, right? And so therefore, understanding that they are wrong and the reason that they're wrong, then naturally we will try to rid ourselves of that habit, right? We do it one at a time. And when we conquer one, we don't celebrate and say, all right, good, I got rid of that one. No, now you just brought yourself from the wrong position to the right position in one area, right? But there's a whole other area. So then you look at the next one, the next biggest problem, right? Right? Maybe it's breach of duty toward parents. Maybe it's treason. Maybe it's evil company in the guise of dance and music. That's actually a big one, right? We think we're just having fun. We're not hurting anybody. There's no harm here, right? But actually, we're being influenced, right? It doesn't mean that dancing and singing is bad. You know, we dance in kirtan, we sing for Krishna. Krishna likes these things. But if we're doing them for sense gratification and we're keeping company of those who strictly do these things for sense gratification, then that's a big deal. So we find the next big deal. We see why it's holding us back from devotional service, and then so we retract it. So let's take that one for example, the evil company in the guise of dance and music. So we appreciate music, we appreciate expressing ourselves through the music by dancing, but we understand that when we're doing it for sense gratification and associating with those who do it strictly for sense gratification, it's pulling us in the wrong direction. Therefore, we retract from that, but we still have the nature and the tendency, so we start dancing in kirtan and singing. So it's still singing and dancing, but now it's in the association of devotees, and it's now becoming purified by ridding ourselves of the bondage and aiding ourselves in the liberation, right? So we do these one by one. We remove it from the negative and we engage it in the positive, right? Because even, let's say fault finding, right? Fault finding's bad, but it's also, if you do it the right way, it's just called discrimination, right? You do it one way, fault finding, and you're criticizing people, that's bad. But you can use that same tendency to recognize your own faults and to rectify yourself. So you're still fault finding, but now you're just doing it in a positive way. Now instead of finding someone else's fault and making myself further bound to the material world, I'm finding my fault, rectifying it, and actually partaking in the process of liberation. Same exact thing, just used in the right way. Yes?
Same with the desire to control and to enjoy, but let's say the control. Somebody asked Jaya, so what to do with this desire to control? And he said, well, control your mind and senses.
Hare Krishna. Good answer from Maharaj. Yeah. Yeah, anything can be used in Krishna service, so we have to find out how and then do that. But we pick you start with the biggest offender. You look at that list and say, okay, which one is the worst one for me? And then you figure out a way to engage it properly. And if you can't figure it out, ask someone like Jayadvaita Swami, some other sadhu, right? But figure it out, because that's the only thing that's holding us back from bhakti, is our lack of proper effort in controlling them. Isn't that crazy? It's all on us. We have no one else to blame. And we have to understand that, we have to embrace that. Because as long as we're blaming someone else, that means I don't have to do anything. It's not my fault. I just have to wait until justice comes, right? Because it's my natural position to be in the spiritual world. So I just have to wait until that social justice comes about, and then that's where I'll be. No, because it's our fault, so we have to do something about it. Yes, tell us, Prabhu.
One spiritual master gave the example, it's like you're trying to light a fire, and the fire just starts burning, then you pour water on it.
Yeah.
And then after a little while again, the fire just starts burning again, and then you put water again. This is what we do.
Yeah, we are doing that. Anything else? Okay, so on Monday we'll begin the Prayojana section, the goal. And maybe we'll finish it on Tuesday. Om Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Śrīla Prabhupada ki jai, Bhakti-yoga Thakur ki jai, Tattva-sutra ki jai.